There's always another secret, and my current secret is that there is a book that has caused me to find my love for reading again. And that book is Mistborn or Misborn The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Let's talk about it. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Joven, and this is the GoLoco Show, where we talk about my latest hyperfixation. And today's hyperfixation is Mistborn, and also how I got back into reading. If you have noticed, I have moved. I moved twice since the last video, and I've also have a new camera and a new mic. So if there's a little difference in quality, that's why I'm still trying to get used to this in this new setting with new equipment. I want to explain how I got back into reading. When I was younger, like elementary through early high school, I was reading all the time. Some people might have been called iPad kids. I was the one who was reading the latest Percy Jackson book while downing my breakfast before school. I was reading through that thing. I was finishing books in like a matter of days. I loved reading so much. And my favorite series to read back then were, of course, like Harry Potter. This was before the author was exposed for who they really are. Still one of my favorite series, but I also love Pendragon, series of unfortunate events, and of course the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, as well as a lot of the Riordan verse in general. However, some point during high school, I stopped. I don't remember why, but I stopped looking into like the other worlds, through text at least. Maybe it was me just watching more anime or movies or TV shows, but looking back, I feel like I still should have found more time to read, And now that I'm older, I feel that longing to explore different planets, different scenarios, things I'll never experience in my day-to-day life, and just begin to push my imagination to visualize all these things, just to experience it. And to restart this journey, I turned to the internet, of course, and see what a good place to start was to restart my reading journey. I've loved fantasy and sci-fi, so that's what I was looking towards first. And I saw that, this book right here, this Mistborn would be a good choice. And boy, was I right to pick it up. So let's just talk about Mistborn. So Mistborn is essentially the story on what if the bad guy had won 1,000 years ago, So let's imagine if Voldemort won, or the Empire in Star Wars, they were allowed to rule for millennia before A New Hope. The bad guy in this case is called the Lord Ruler. He's an immortal dictator and the self-proclaimed god of this empire, He rose with an iron fist and few have seen him. And in his final empire, as it's called, there's a caste system, I think that's fair to say, with the lower class Ska, and they're ruled over by the upper class nobles. The Ska are treated horribly, and they're basically like slaves or the indentured servants to the nobles and the final empire as a whole. In this world, nobles have the ability to possibly become Mistings or Misborn. This magic system known as allomancy in Mistborn, you would consume certain metals and you gain abilities. So let's say you consume a certain metal, you can push yourself away from metals, or you can soothe the emotions of others, like calm people down, right? Or you can conceal the people around you's abilities from other Mistings or Mistborn, right? For Mistings, you're only able to consume one type of metal, and you can only use that metal's ability. For Mistborns, however, you're allowed to consume all the metals that are able to be used in this magic system and use all of those abilities. Typically, nobles only ones who can use these abilities, right? However, over the last 1,000 years, of course, nobles have gotten with Ska and their offspring, these hybrids, despite having Ska blood, have been able to become Mistings or Mistborns themselves. Among the Ska is Vin, a street urchin, a thief with a lot of trauma, a lot. And she wants to be unnoticed, because if she's not noticed, she's going to survive, right? However, through chance, she happens to run into Kelsier, another thief and a Mistborn. He recruits her into his thieving crew and asks her to join the greatest heist of all, with the goal of overthrowing the Lord Ruler and the Final Empire. With these ragtag band of thieves, Vin also finds out she's also a Mistborn and will need to learn valuable lessons, including what it means to trust others. So, both Vin and Kelsier serve as the main point of view characters in this book. There is a third, I'll go into that later in the spoiler section. Vin wants to be in the shadows. She does not want to be seen, she does not want to be noticed. As if she's noticed, she thinks she'll survive. She does not trust anyone. She believes anyone at any point is going to betray her. And from her personal experience, I don't blame her, For her whole life, she's learned to only look out for herself, and everyone else also looks out for themselves. Her journey through Mistborn, as she's exposed to more of the world, this is meant to challenge everything she knows at this point. Vin has to learn to trust others. And also, she also learns, or at least starts to question, are Scott and nobles more similar than they are different? And she needs to learn to believe more in herself. And we see all of these parts of her character growth throughout Mistborn. The other point of view character, Kelsier, is a skilled thief and a Mistborn. He's charismatic, he's egotistical, and he's very extreme in what he believes in. He hates the Lord Rulers and the nobles more than anything. And his idea of a Scar rebellion, of overthrowing the Final Empire, many of Kelsier's crew, including Vin, doubt Kelsier's motives and doubt that he's not at least being a little bit selfish, or if not fully selfish, in this rebellion. Can someone who's only acted for himself for so long truly be the leader of such a big revolution? I do love seeing Vin, Kelsier, and the rest of the crew's dynamics. The crew has known each other for so long and formed deep connections prior to Mistborn, right? So this is Vin coming in and basically bonding with this found family, essentially. She's learning to trust others, and she has to learn to be more confident in herself. That's really the heart of this book. That's her main story. Throughout the book, you see her mentality, her mindset changing, her character growth progressing. And I do feel that I did want to focus more on the crew, not like overall, but like individually. I feel like some of the crew have more lengthy interactions than others, and we don't really get into the minds of them as much as Vin and Kelsier, which makes sense. Vin and Kelsier are the main POV characters, but it wasn't a detriment to the story at all. Vin and Kelsier are such standouts. I really hope the rest of this trilogy gives more shine to the other side characters, and I have heard at least some more POVs are added down the line, so we'll see how that goes. Structure-wise, I think the pacing could have been a bit faster at some points. The beginning and the setup were really well thought out, and the ending, which is my first Sanderlanche, where Brandon Sanderson weaves all of his plot points into like a very crazy finale. It was crazy and intense, you know. Basically, all the plot threads, everything that was set up, everything foreshadowed, all the clues, they all just come together, and it was just an incredibly heart-pounding finale. It was just amazing. I will say, because of that, there are parts in the middle section where I feel like stuff's not happening as fast, or there's more setup that is needed to be done for the ending, and definitely slows down a bit. But because of that ending, I do appreciate the setup and the character work, which a lot of the character work happens in this middle section, and I appreciate it. But I could definitely see where people would say it's a little bit dragging, but without it, I don't think the Sanderlanche would hit. So I understand it's needed. Now, before we get into spoilers, I have a timestamp on screen right now if you want to not listen to any spoilers, right? So click it right now. Spoiler warning coming in, so you've been warned. Okay, from here on out, spoilers. Now, I'm not going to go super in-depth and discuss everything, since I want you to experience it for yourself, even through this section. This is just basically the talking points that I want to discuss that I can't really talk about without at least some spoilers, right? So I'm not going to go through every single detail and every single spoiler, but the things I want to discuss, they're going to be spoiled, right? Okay, first thing I want to discuss is Elend's POV. I think it's Elend. Elend's POV being added with, like, it's basically a third or maybe even a quarter of the story left. It felt a little jarring, right? I understand it was meant to flesh out Elend and the choice he makes to help out the Scar Rebellion, despite being a noble of House Venture, the heir of the Venture House, which is basically like one of the most powerful noble families in all of Luthendale. And I understand why his POV needed to be added, but it kind of felt a little late to add. I think Sanderson could have gone away with cutting some earlier parts, or some parts that were originally Vin's POV, and put it as Elend's POV, especially during some of those dance or ball section. I do know if he didn't cut anything and he just added Elend's POV earlier, that would have made that middle section even more bloated. But I could see another version where some of the Vin and Kelsier chapters that I said earlier that were a little dragging or a little slow, they could have been cut in favor of some more Elend chapters. Because most of Elend's character, I feel, is just made from inferences from Vin and Kelsier, and Vin's normally turns out to be more right. I would have liked Elend to be saying how he felt, or in his POV. That way we could have fleshed his um, what he was thinking, all his thoughts better. Um, and also, it would have been better to see the world of the nobles through him more, because we really only get a taste of it. I understand the nobles are just meant to be this overruling class. A lot of them are really um, evil and everything, but just a little bit more of Ellen's point of view, I think, would have been. I would have liked this book a little bit more. The ending where the Lord Ruler, after being defeated by Vin, he's basically begging or warning her that him dying is basically, there's something that his presence was making everything in this world stable. And that makes me wonder, what could be worse than the dictatorship of an immortal fascist? What's worse than that? Could the Lord Ruler have been a quote unquote necessary evil? I'm guessing we'll have to find out on the next book. And finally, the last part I want to talk about, I love the hints of Kael'Seer planning his death as a martyr through his talks with Sazed. I didn't listen to the audiobook of this, so I might be off, but they talk about the old religions of the world before the Final Empire, and you can just kind of see Kelsear's gears slightly turning, like what he's thinking, but he's never outwardly saying it, even when it's his POV chapter. So you never get the real moment on which he fully plans this out until the end where it's explained. But he knew the Skaal were weak-willed or afraid to stand up to the Lord Ruler under normal circumstances. But Kelsear, knowing that him dying could possibly lead to like a bigger legend, the legend of Kelsear. And I can see this plan, while it's for the greater good, I also feel where it's a slight betrayal to Vin after all she's learned, right? Even if it's like a subtle thing, even if it's not like outright her abandoning the plan. I just want to know if this comes up more in the future books, just because Vin's whole character arc in this book was learning to trust her friends and found family, and yet arguably Kelsear sacrificing himself and not telling everyone is technically a lie, right? It is a betrayal of Vin's trust to her, the crew, but in the end, it also made sure that the plan to overthrow the Final Empire worked, right? And in the end, Vin, the crew, the plan, and Ska so far are safe, right? But yeah, I just want to see if that gets talked more about later on. Overall, Mistborn The Final Empire, amazing book. It definitely wraps up in a way where I could probably stop here and be satisfied with like a standalone story, but sets up just enough where I'm looking forward to continue my journey through the Cosmere with Brandon Sanderson. I love these characters. The world building, the magic system is really well thought out. And while there were some slow points in the middle, Sanderson's able to weave all of these threads, these plot threads, these foreshadowing and clues to an amazing, fast-paced finale. You know. And with that being said, I think I'm gonna give Mistborn 4.5 out of 5 with an asterisk. So at any point I could change to a 5 out of 5. It was such a beautiful and correct choice as a book to restart my reading journey. I cannot wait to see what happens next. In fact, I think I'm gonna continue reading right now. So wherever and whenever you are in the world, I hope you have an amazing day. And here's another secret. I believe you will. Signing off.